It's been 14 years since Kyron vanished, and one thing that's been missing with Kyron is justice.
For the last 10 years, Desiree Young has wondered in anguish what happened to her little boy.
Kyron's parents pleaded with Terri to tell police what she knows.
I want her to know that we're done waiting, that this is not a joke. This is Kyron's life that we're talking about.
Search crews comb the area around Skyline Elementary looking for Kyron Horman.
And still, no sign.
I would give anything to go back in time and pull him out of that moment, protect him, and be there. And I can't undo that. And I can't undo that. Undo that. Undo that.
Chapter 1, Innocence Lost. Tell me a little bit about Kyron.
Kyron is a very shy, super funny, very compassionate and loving child. Kyron is super intelligent. You don't realize he's in a room and he's paying attention and taking it all in. And then he'll pop off with some really complicated word and you just are like, where in the world did you get that? And, oh, he picked it up from someone, somewhere, you know, and he just is that kid that you love being around. I have an older son, and those two would feed off of each other, and it's just hilarious to watch them because Quinn would just look at him with this face, all super serious. And then Kyron would start cracking up and they would just go with it, you know? And it was like a comedy act. And on the weekends, it was all about family time. Mm-hmm. We just would hang around the house, or he would ride his bike, and we'd go for walks around the neighborhood. We know all of our neighbors. We're super close with our neighbors. That's the people that we are. We look out for each other. We've always been that way. We have a tight group, a trusted group. Like, our life had structure and boundaries, and you just wouldn't expect this to happen. Mm-hmm. You just wouldn't ever expect it. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to know that aspect of our lives and to know that he went missing.
Skyline second grader Kyron Horman did not arrive home from school today.
Kyron!
Kyron!
Kyron, we miss you, we love you, and we need you home right now.
Chapter 2, Mask of Deceit.
I found out about her from my best friend. She made him call me on July 15, 2002 at 4 in the morning. I was pregnant, and Kane had cheated on me. Apparently, he said something by mistake. He was cheating on me for a while, that he cheated on me before, prior to that, that this person was a teacher that he knew of. She had red hair. And so I did something that I had never done in my life, and I spied on him. And I pulled out his briefcase and found a letter in her handwriting, and it was exactly how to screw me out of a divorce. And she said, "You will have lots of sex with me." That was how I realized that my life was not really what I thought. In January, after I had moved out, she was waiting around the corner with her stuff, and she moved in right away. The day that I figured out who she was, we get an invite in Quinn's backpack for a birthday party. And when I looked at it, I recognized the handwriting. I hadn't met Terri until Kyron was, I think it was 1. And I hear Quinn hop out of the car and say, "Hi, Terri." And that was when I realized she was walking up to us. That was the first time that I met her. I was careful. I didn't say a word to her. She offered her hand to me and I ignored her. So I was holding back a lot of anger over the years and all hurt that I had endured because I wanted to be a good person in front of my boys. We could stand next to each other at soccer events, track, cross country. We supported the boys. I have stood there and stuffed back all the feelings that I've ever had because it was important for my kids to learn from this that we were going to co-parent together, as painful as some of it was. You know, we went forward, life happened. We were, I think, as successful as you can be in a co-parenting relationship. You know, we were always at sporting events all together. I drove for hours in the middle of the night to make sure that I was there for my boys. It was very challenging, but we made it work. I did have significant medical problems, and that was when I didn't have custody, although I had custody in the very beginning. But I can't control that, unfortunately. So that was where we were at, you know, in 2010. We were making it work. And Quinn was 15 when Kyron went missing.
Chapter 3, The Vanishing.
I was at home in Southern Oregon, actually going to work, but I did talk with Kyron. He was nervous, and I was just trying to reassure him. Kane told me he ended up not going to the science fair. He had a meeting, I guess. He had sent Terri with Kyron. Kyron normally rides the bus to school, but the presentation and the diorama was going to be exhibited to the entire school.
Okay.
So everybody's walking through the classrooms and looking at all of the exhibits.
Okay.
7-year-old Kyron Horman disappeared from Skyline Elementary School.
He was wearing a black CSI T-shirt, black cargo pants.
Kyron was last seen by his stepmother, Terri Horman, who dropped him off at Skyline Elementary. No one has been charged in his disappearance.
That night when they interviewed us, they came to me and Tony in the house, and I believe that they were working through ruling us out. They had to alibi us, had to get our information, all of that. So by about 3 in the morning, they came to us and asked us to go to the school. And I thought, oh, they must have cleared us, right? I remember it was one of the most difficult situations because I started to walk into the school and I saw all the exhibits in the hallway still. And I thought I was gonna throw up and I couldn't walk. And thank God Tony was holding me up. It was one of the moments where I realized, oh my God, this is happening. And then I looked up and I saw Ben Kiefer, the principal, coming toward us. I don't recall what Ben said to me. I just know that he came up to me and offered his hand, and there was a team of law enforcement there. And I remember not knowing who they were necessarily. They were clearly not people that I had already met at the house, but they had asked me to come into an office so that I could be interviewed. They separated me and Tony, of course, and a team went with Tony, a team went with me. I remember sitting across a round table from a couple of individuals. I believe one was with the F.B.I. and I believe one was with Multnomah County. I remember just really struggling to try and think who in the world could possibly do this. You know, they asked me the usual questions. They had me go through everywhere I had been that day. You know, I said, you can have everything. Like, if you need to go through our house, if you need my computer, my phone, you can have everything. We were talking and they asked, do you know anybody who could do this to Kyron? Who would take Kyron? And I said, I honestly don't know. I offered up everything I could possibly think of. I actually thought of all the evil in the world first, and they asked, you know, if I knew where Kyron was. And I said, God, I wish I knew. I would give anything to go back in time and to pull him out of that moment and protect him and be there. And I can't undo that. And I can't undo that. Undo that. Undo that.
Chapter 4, Searching.
The second it's too quiet, the second that I feel like it's not working in our favor, we're not helping Kyron, there's nothing happening, then I'm gonna do something to force the issue, right? And that's what I've done over the years. I'll do a search, and I have always been completely transparent whenever I've done a search. We have always turned over all evidence. I am very careful about the way I run searches, and I always have the proper technology, the people that are certified in Multnomah County doing the searching. I have dog teams that are brought in from all over the U.S. who are trustworthy and can do the job, and I know that the dog teams are reliable. I don't ever run it half-assed. I would never do that. I would never want to compromise Kyron's case. I have done a search every year with the exception of the last couple, and it's been a long journey. I have, over the years, helped families of missing children. I've been a resource for parents when their child goes missing and in those first moments. The thing I'm most passionate about and connected to is working with the Department of Justice and the training facility, the national training facility for training law enforcement on CART teams, child abduction response teams. I speak to law enforcement about the family perspective, the best practices, the protocols we need to follow in cases like this. I feel like I make more of an impact when I can make that change in how we help the families, how we investigate these cases, how do we do it right, how do we improve on what we've done wrong. But I think that I have that impact and I can make change. I can hopefully be heard in a different way. I think it's really, really important to improve on everything that we do, or we're not going to ever bring our kids home.
Chapter 5, Shadows of Discord.
And from what I understand, their house was very divided at the time when Kyron went missing. Kyron was struggling. He didn't want to go back. He would cry and cry and cry and didn't want me to take him back. We realized that he was wetting the bed. I didn't know why that was. He couldn't articulate what the problem was to me, but there was problems, clearly. And it finally came to a head where I wasn't gonna take him back. I couldn't do it, and I want to protect my child. There's clearly something going on. And I called Kane and I told him I wasn't bringing him home. And Kane said, yes, you are. That this is not an option. And I said, I'm taking custody back. He said, it's not an option. And he said, you will bring him home. And I said, I'm not telling him that anymore. This has been going for far too long. There's clearly something happening. And I gave the phone to Kyron, and I normally do not act that way, but I did not want to be that person.
Yeah.
So he had to be the bad guy and tell Kyron that he had to come home. And Terri was calling me sometimes in the middle of the night in that year. She wanted me to take Kyron. She asked me on several occasions. One day I was running errands, and she called, and I could hear Kyron in the background crying. And I said, what's going on? She said, I want you to come and get him. Okay, I'm getting in the car. I'm coming. And I get in the car and I'm calling Kane at the same time. Said, something's going on. I'm going to get Kyron. No, you're not. That's not an option. And I'll be honest, Kane probably didn't handle it the right way. Kyron was clearly having issues, and then he was ignoring all of it. Another thing that I was seeing in the year leading up to Kyron going missing, though I didn't know it at the time, Terri was manipulating the situation and telling Kane and I that Kyron was behaving poorly at school. I'm horrified because Kyron was almost grounded for Christmas, and I actually had my child sit down and write a letter to Santa apologizing for his bad behavior when he didn't have bad behavior. I know Terri. I know how evil she is.
Chapter 6, Truth Unveiled.
Terri ended up taking Kane's truck that day. She needed it so that she could pick up the science fair exhibit after it was done. That's unusual. The science fair exhibits were supposed to remain up until Monday. She arrived around 8:15. Miss Porter arrived around 8:25. So there was a period of time where Terri and Kyron were in the school without other parents, but there was administrative support staff already there, and that's how we know when she got there. Terri proceeded to take Kyron around to the classrooms. She went to 3 classrooms with Kyron. We know that she walked up through the East End stairwell. The story that Terri tells coming up that stairwell is that she walked him up to the main hallway, didn't walk him all the way to Miss Porter's class at the very end of that hallway, that she waved to him from the top of those stairs. It's significant because if she was standing at the top of those stairs, there's no way she would even be able to see Kyron. She would see a wall. Yeah. The other caveat is the picture. So the real timeline that we know, absolutely, witnessed by everybody on GPS with the camera, is that she came up that stairwell, walked Kyron all the way to Miss Porter's classroom, took pictures of him and his 2 friends in front of the diorama, time-stamped, 8:45, right before she walks out the side doors with Kyron. That also is witnessed by Kyron's bus driver. She happened to be sitting in her bus and saw Terri and Kyron come out of the school with Kiara. And his other friend and grandma and sister are outside the school and see Kyron leaving with Terri. So we know that Terri went from the school, and we know that she went to 2 Fred Meyers. She claims that she was there to buy cold medicine for Kiara, supposedly. Well, that's the funny thing is Kiara was not sick at the time that Kyron went missing. She was sick a couple weeks earlier. She had actually taken antibiotics and by that point was fine. She claimed that the first Fred Meyer didn't have it and that she went to the second Fred Meyer. So she's seen pulling into the second Fred Meyer, pulling into the parking lot. She's on video surveillance. Kyron is nowhere to be seen in the video surveillance, although Kyron is the type of child, if you told him to stay in the car, he would absolutely listen to you. From that moment, Terri is missing, although seen by witnesses in various side roads off of the Skyline area. She's seen pulled over on the side of the road. Her phone is out of signal for a significant period of time. Her phone pings at 11 a.m. driving down Highway 30. She's seen checking Kiara in there at the gym. She was seen walking around talking to people she did not know significantly, but showing them the photo of Kyron. She had injured her leg And the person noted that Terri indicated it was because she dropped a weight on her leg, down her shin. But the person said it was not that kind of injury. It was like she scraped it on something uneven and jagged. And it was odd because she did not work out. Not once.
How long was she at the gym?
A total of about 15 to 18 minutes.
What?
Yeah. She didn't work out. She has several interviews in the first several days, right?
Okay.
And so the first timeline she's giving doesn't have that in there.
Okay.
So they're wondering, where is she between, these times? So at first, the timeline is very sparse because she hasn't thought it through. She hasn't figured out where she was. She can't account for that time.
Okay.
So she's having to manufacture stuff. So initially, the timeline she gives them doesn't have any of that in there.
Okay.
And then they're coming back to her with evidence. We have an eyewitness that put you here. We have your phone ping here. Like, where were you? And then she's trying to fill that in, right?
Okay.
And so she comes back with several different things. She claims she was at Michael's. Well, they know that her phone pinged at 11 on Highway 30. You couldn't have been at Michael's. Not only that, but there's no video surveillance of you at Michael's. Not only that, but the staff there claims to never have seen you at Michael's. And then she changes her version again. And I believe it was Monday. I'm in the house and she was on her computer and I asked her what she was doing. And she's like, she was defensive and didn't want me looking at her computer. And she's like, you just need to mind your own business. And I said, okay. I just was asking what you were doing. Well, they're trying to get my timeline of where I was. Okay, so she was typing up her timeline. I can tell you to this day, 13 years later, every single place I went to that day, and I know because that was the day the world came out from under me. I know what I ate for goddamn lunch. I can tell you everything I did that day, and she can't figure out where she was or what she did. It took me a while before I offered Terri up. It was awkward. The more time that went on, the more my feelings couldn't be concealed. It was really uncomfortable to be there with her and watch her behavior, where she wasn't sad, she wasn't doing all of that stuff. She was going out of her way to lead a normal life, so to speak. She was getting her hair done. She was going to the gym. She was doing all this stuff, and I could barely function. I didn't want to live after Kyron. It was really hard. And I think it got to the point where it was so glaring that we all looked at each other, we all being Kane, Tony, and I. There's just no other person, right? Well, I'll tell you that our law enforcement team was very good not to focus too early on her.
Okay.
It was because of Terri alone, her actions, her lies, everything that we could prove, all the physical evidence, all the circumstantial evidence. It was because of all of that that they really started focusing on her. It wasn't any other reason. I will say that they have gone out of their way to exhaust every other angle and suspect out there. They have ruled out every parent that was in the school that day, every registered sex offender in the area, every house that neighbors up to the school. They have ruled out every single possible other person except one. I should say two. Terry's friend, Dee Dee Spicer. You don't get Dee Dee without Terri. In fact, they've had a personal relationship physically. As far as I'm aware, Dee Dee was 2 miles from the school on Germantown Road. working at a property where she was landscaping for them. She was also missing during the same period of time that Terri was. The people on the property always have lunch together in their central location, and they were trying to locate her, and she was missing.
Okay.
And they tried calling her, and she didn't answer. Her phone was on the property. Her car was on the property, but Dee Dee was nowhere to be found, and they looked everywhere. It's our understanding through information I've had turned over to me during searches that she was picked up by Terri from her job on that property. In the DA's office, they believed at the time that they could get her to flip on Terri. Several weeks later, they made an agreement with Dee Dee Spicer for immunity. Here's the problem with that. As you're investigating, you're getting evidence, you're obtaining new information, new interviews, all the things, right? And now, today, what we can say is there's physical evidence that is involving her. From what I understand, Dee Dee Spicer said Terri was using throwaway phones and had loaded it with minutes and was using that to communicate with people. They were able to acquire the phones. Dee Dee took them where they dumped them. I don't know when the phones were dumped. They got access to them a couple of weeks after Kyron went missing. There's communication connected to photos that were stored on the phone that is the physical evidence in the case. It's all things that you know, imply guilt. It's all things showing conceal and lie and deceit. All of it is circumstantial, which is unfortunate. And then she proceeds to plead the fifth. She doesn't want people to know what she is. And now that she has an immunity deal, we can never prosecute her. We can't ever fix that.
Chapter 7, Missed Clues.
And I think that it was the one moment at that first press conference, Terri was looking at the cameras and realizing that Kyron was not going to be taken without a huge aftermath. She thought it would be a blip on the screen and everybody go about their merry lives and forget what had just happened. She did not gamble on the fact that Kyron would be huge and that everybody would love Kyron and that it would be the biggest case in Oregon's history. She did not bet on that. I was really having a moment of, I cannot believe that they haven't arrested her. Like, she is faking she did this. And I remember saying to my husband, you better get her away from me. And Mary Lynn Strand looked at me and knew in that moment that she needed to take Terri out of there. She didn't like that because she never could con me into thinking that fake Terri was the real thing. And she hated that aspect about me, is that I was real and I knew what the score was, and she did not like that. And when she was being let out the back, I think all of that was coming to a head. If there was ever any impact it had, you could see it. And they sent an investigator to take her to go get interviewed, and it shut her down. It was the wrong investigator. And I talk about that with law enforcement because it's huge. When you have somebody who's building a rapport with someone and they could potentially get answers, it is so important to send the right person in there at that moment. That was the one moment, and we lost it at that moment. That was it. It was done. We would never recover from that moment.
Chapter 8, Drive into Darkness.
When we were driving to and from the school, every time I was looking out the window, looking, searching, all the time. Never once did she ever look around. In fact, she asked me, "What are you doing?" Like she was annoyed at it. I said, "I'm looking for my son. What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And she thought that was odd.
Chapter 9, broken facade.
When Terri came in from failing one of the polygraphs, she was visibly shaken by it, and she was scrambling to try and justify herself. She's bothered by it. Not the same way I think that normal people would be, just like in a frenzy. And she's walking around the living room, and she walks over to me, and I'm sitting in a recliner, leans over the arm at me and says, "I want you to know I loved your son." And I heard it, and I looked at her and I said, "What did you say?" "I loved your son. I love my son. I love my son still. I will never stop loving my son." You said past tense, and yes. I stood up and looked at my mom, and I was in like a moment of rage. Someone has to get me, I'm gonna kill her. I had to walk out of the house. I couldn't handle it. I was at my limit. And Tony looked at me from outside and knew something was wrong. And he came up to me and I said, "She said she loved my son." Past tense. She said loved, not love. She did something to him. And I hadn't slept in days. Tony thought I was being emotional. I said, "Ask my mom. She said that. That was her words. I'm not being emotional. I'm telling you, it's a fact." It got even more uncomfortable. She failed the second polygraph.
A second?
Yes.
With the FBI?
Yes. And they were able to get to another version of her timeline through that polygraph, right? And so as a result, we were concerned at that point. Tony said to me, "They're not clearing her off their list. There's something wrong."
Yeah.
And so we all went into Kyron's bedroom, away from my parents, my son, and we went in there to talk. And Kane, Tony, and I confronted her. And I said to her, trying to appeal to her motherly instinct if she had one, think about it if it was Kiara. If it was Kiara and I was the last person with her, would you not want me to do everything humanly possible to clear myself? Would you not want me to take 5,000 polygraphs if I had to? If you have to take 11 polygraphs and it's uncomfortable, you do it, because we have to find Kyron. We hit her hard. We've all taken polygraphs. It's uncomfortable. That's all she vented about, how uncomfortable and awkward it was. They're mean to me. Absolutely, it's uncomfortable. I was scared to death that they wouldn't believe me, that I had nothing to do with it. But I passed because I didn't have anything to do with it. Because I have no guilty conscience. I love my son. She can't get cleared. She can't pass a polygraph because she's lying, she's deceiving, and she absolutely knew where Kyron was. And that's the question she failed. Where is Kyron? Did you have any involvement? Were you with Kyron after 8:45?
And she failed those questions?
Yes. And when they asked her to do a third, she walked out of the polygraph, got up and walked out, wouldn't finish it.
Chapter 10. Bloodstains. The DNA in the pickup truck. Tell me about that.
It was in the bed of the pickup.
Kyron's DNA. Do you know what type of DNA? Was it blood? Was it?
According to Terri, it was blood. She was telling them, or telling us in the house, that they had found that and had confronted her on it.
And the police have not divulged this publicly, right?
No.
Which makes sense. But she said that. Did they take the truck? They took the truck.
In the beginning, yes.
Okay. So
and they did, all the workup and multiple times. Yeah.
Was that the only vehicle that they took?
Nope, the Mustang also. She basically stopped cooperating, stopped doing interviews. It was about that time that we discovered through the evidence that she had tried to hire 3 different people to kill Kane in the year leading up to Kyron.
Oh, I'm speechless. So Terri has tried to hire someone to kill her husband.
3 different people.
3 different people.
Yes.
Not 1, not 2, 3.
Yes.
Before Kyron's disappearance.
Yes. It was a week prior to Kyron going missing where she had reached out to the 3rd person. It was a landscaper. She reached out to him in a final attempt to see if he would do it for her.
Just 2 weeks later, Kyron's father moves out of the home he shared with Terri Horman, taking his 1-year-old daughter with him. Days later, Coin6 confirms that Terri is a suspect in a murder-for-hire plot. Deputies believe she tried to hire a landscaper to kill her husband.
You could see it in the team. They were ready to go in and arrest her. They were. And when Casey Anthony happened, everything stalled. They backed up. The challenge with the Casey Anthony case was because they charged her before they had Kaylee.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the evidence in that case was not admissible because of that.
Right.
And that's what scared them.
As to the charge of first-degree murder, verdict as to count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, on this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated child abuse, verdict as to count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson.
Forever have a hole in my heart because he's not here.
Young and her family are still fighting for Kyron. Just last Friday, she filed a $10 million civil lawsuit against Kyron's stepmother, Terri Horman, who investigators say was the last person to see Kyron alive.
I don't want Terri's money. I want Terri to face justice. She hasn't yet taken responsibility.
The lawsuit would allow Young's lawyer, Eldon Rosenthal, to subpoena witnesses, acquire documents and evidence, and peel away the mystery of what happened to Kyron.
Through this process, I hope to compel her to accept responsibility for what she's done.
Chapter 11, Legal Crossroads.
The civil case really was, I was watching a TV show where a case had used that as a tool and had actually been able to prosecute someone based on the evidence that came from interviewing the suspect. Mm-hmm. In that case.
Because in a civil case, you go through it all again. You have depositions.
You do discovery, you do depositions, and that deposition had brought up the inconsistencies, the lies, the provable lies, and had painted him into a corner where there was just no way around it. He murdered this girl. It was at that moment when Tony and I were watching that show that we were looking at each other going, is that a possibility for us? And that's when we started looking into it as an option. And yes, it absolutely was a possibility. Mm-hmm. I had, of course, many meetings leading up to announcing it. I had the understanding that I would not have any problems getting the case file from law enforcement. It wasn't until we started moving forward, we had deposed Kane, we had deposed me, we had tried to depose Dee Dee Spicer. We had started moving down that path where, okay, we're doing this, right? And the DA's office wouldn't give me the case file. I had to make a decision, and it wasn't just about Kyron. It was about every family of every missing child that comes after me. It would have changed the way that law enforcement would have communicated or divulged anything in a missing child case for everyone that came after me. I didn't want to do that and make it so that the family couldn't have answers or information about their child. I absolutely would have won if I pushed it in court. I could have gotten the file. I didn't want that on my heart, and I didn't want that to be Kyron's legacy, so I reluctantly had to dismiss the civil case. I don't know that we would have been successful in what I wanted. I wanted answers, I wanted Kyron. But tell me where Kyron is and give me answers. It's gonna take someone who has the balls to go up against her. Because I truly believe in my heart that we will get a conviction. We have several 100,000 Kyron supporters who follow us every day, and they want justice for Kyron. They want someone to act. It just takes the right person with the guts to say, okay, if we're not ready right this second, fine, let's get ready. Let's convene a task force. Let's get all this stuff together. Get it organized. Let's get ready for prosecution. I don't know if we will be able to find Kyron. I don't know that she'll ever be truthful and reveal what she did. I don't know those things. But what I do know is that she did this, and that, okay, fine, what do we do about it? Do we let her just go off into the sunset? Do it to somebody else? She will absolutely slip up. She is a creature of habit. She has been perpetuating the same pattern after Kyron went missing. She keeps doing all the same things. She will not change. So do we allow that to happen and then her take someone else's child? No. No. I say we go get her. It's gonna happen. And at this point, I don't care if she goes to prison. I want my son home. No matter what the outcome was. I just want
answers. What answers?
I want to be able to put this in a place where we're not still on that roller coaster. We're not still looking at every child in the grocery store that looks like it could be Kyron. We're not still looking for him. I want Kyron home. I want to be able to hug him again. I want 5 more minutes with him. But if that wasn't what she did that day, then okay. I am a reasonable person. I get it. But I want to be able to put him to rest. If that's what she did.
Chapter 12. Family Fractured.
When he found out about the murder for hire plot a month after Kyron went missing, he took Kiara out of the house and filed a restraining order. And that was when he filed for divorce. It actually took, I believe, 2 years for it to be final because he had written into the paperwork and stuff that she had to be compelled to speak. And she could not get visitation without adhering to some of these stipulations. She refused to do any of that. And so it was kind of a stalemate situation, which I feel like we're in now. But he had to basically wait her out and then finally just force the issue. I mean, he came to Tony and I and asked us to take Kiara, and I wanted to. Man, that was my reflex. But I told him that he needed to get to know his daughter, and he didn't need another woman coming in and saving him from this.
Yeah.
That he needed to do this to be a better person, a better father, and just an overall involved dad. I wasn't going to save him from that. And he keeps having these people that come in and help him.
Yeah. You know.
Well, and I told him above all,
Yeah.
he needed to protect Kiara.
Yeah.
And don't ever sacrifice that. And I said, I will come and hunt you down if you ever let her have visitation. Seriously, if I hear of one visit.
Yeah.
And he was like, I know. I said, I don't think you do. I'm not going to save you from this, but I swear to God, no. She hasn't adhered to any of the stipulations. She barely has paid child support. She had to clear herself and sit down with law enforcement about Kyron's case. Still hasn't done any of that. She had to navigate supervised visits, which she never did any of that. She just took off. There's tons of things that she had to adhere to in order to get to a point where she could reintegrate. She hasn't done any of it. And Kiara, I gotta think of how old she is now, 16? She was at Kyron's school and has moved on to, I believe she's in 9th or 10th grade now. So, but Skyline only goes up to 8th grade, but she was there still. I saw her, the last time I got to see her was at the 5-year mark. And Chris, Kane's mom, brought her to me. I can't tell you, there's a piece of Kyron in there. She looks like him. And poor Kiara, she probably thought I was a crazy person. When you have a child, you just have this innate inside yearning to touch them. And when I saw her, I didn't even think about it. I just scooped her up and hugged her and cried. And she remembered me though. And it just was huge. I was so grateful that Chris did that. But I miss Kiara because, you know, I saw her all the time and I always was involved and she would always come to me. It's sad. Those are things that you lose in this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I pray that she's doing good. I pray that Kane has done the right things and
Chapter 13, Echoes of Silence.
Well, and honestly, we have far more evidence now today than we did back then.
Yes, and that's the next thing I was getting to. We have a grand jury that was convened early on, within a couple of months.
Yeah.
Had we had everything that was known today in that grand jury, what would have been the outcome?
I believe we would have indicted.
Has a grand jury been convened since?
Not in the fashion that you're thinking of where they're listening to try and do a charge, right?
Okay.
So I believe that that would be a good move to make.
A game changer.
Yeah.
What is that going to take in Multnomah County to happen? What's the hang up there?
It will take new people. Someone who has the guts to go forward against Terri, and it's not the current DA. Mike Schmidt will not do anything. He doesn't want to do anything. He doesn't have the guts. He doesn't have the integrity. He's not going to do it. So I say, let's get a DA that will. I know a lot of things that indicate to me what she did, which is a horrible picture for me to have in my head. But it's been over 13 years where this has developed. It's all the evidence. It's the physical evidence, the circumstantial evidence. It's the DNA in the pickup. All the things that we have that indicate what she did. The one thing that I hold on to, because a lot of people come to me and say, well, when you're prosecuting a case like this, you can't say if Kyron's out there in the world somewhere. And I say this, Kyron relied on one person that day. That's it. Terri's it. He relied on her that day. He was with her. She had him. It's the worst kind of evil. We implore Terri Horman to fully cooperate with the investigators to bring Kyron home. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. I was not prepared for that moment, for that phone call. The phone call that turned everything I knew and understood to be right in this world upside down.
I remember driving up to the school like it was yesterday.
It's 10 years without his laughter, his smiles, without his hugs. I just want her to see his face every single day. It's a roller coaster every day. Driving up here, I was listening to a song, and it's one of Kyron's songs, and it makes me cry every time. And I wish that we could dance to it again together. That we're done waiting. That this is not a joke. This is Kyron's life that we're talking about. I'm always surprised to see how many people truly love Kyron who don't even know him and haven't met him. I don't care how big he is, I'm gonna pick him up. I might squeeze him a little too tight. 12 years to not have your son, who is a piece of you. It's hard to function every day. Those are the things that make it so hard. Life keeps going, and I'm stuck at June 4th, 2010. I haven't moved past that. Kyron's still 7 to me. No matter what Terri did that day, we still have to find Kyron. We still have to bring him home.